Let's talk job interview questions and answers. I'm going to show you how to ace a job interview. Let's dive in. Okay, the first question you're going to be asked in a job interview is going to be, tell me about yourself, or some other form of it, like, please introduce yourself. The way you answer this question is by saying, well, as you can see from my resume, and then you go down your resume in 45 seconds. That's all, 45 seconds, starting with your oldest material and coming up to your most recent material, okay, which would usually be your current job or your most recent job. And then you end by saying, and that's what brings me here today and why I'm excited to learn more about this opportunity, okay? This is a great way to answer this question. The second question you're probably going to be asked is some variant of, why should we hire you, okay? This question has many, many ways they can phrase it. For example, what are your strengths? Why do you want to work here? What makes you the best candidate? These are all the same question. They're all the same as, why should we hire you? Basically, they're saying, why should we select you instead of somebody else? Okay, that's what this question is. And you answer all of these questions, which is the same question, by giving the same answer, which is, well, as I understand it, you're looking for someone who, and then you go down the posted job requirements, speaking to how you meet each one, okay? In the job ad, you had a list of things they were looking for, certain skills, certain education, certain traits, or certain experience. And you know what they're looking for. So you basically go down those and you explain how you meet each one of those, okay? Now, maybe if you don't exactly meet one or two of them, you at least speak to them and you explain how it's not going to be a problem because you have something that's more or less equivalent to it. So essentially, it's not going to be any kind of showstopper. You've got what it takes. You've got every single thing that they're looking for, okay? These are the things you want to communicate to the interviewers in a job interview, okay? That's how you answer this question. Next question, what are your salary expectations? This tends to really stress people out when they get asked this. The thing about this question is that what you got to understand is that a job application is a different thing from a job interview, okay? Now, when they ask you this question on a job application, they usually make it so that you have to give a number, okay? But that's not the same for a job interview, okay? When you're answering freely, you don't have to give a number. And in fact, that's what we want to do. We want to not give a number. Now, incidentally, in a job application, the way you answer this is you give the lowest possible number that you would ever accept if everything you don't know about the job turned out to be perfect, okay? It was your dream job. That's an honest answer, and there's nothing that says you can't revise your answer later on once they inform you more about what you'll be doing. However, in a job interview, which is what this is about, okay, how do we answer this? We don't want to give a number, okay? The great way to answer this is to say, well, I would really need more details about the job expectations before I could answer that. Okay, so you essentially refuse to answer this. You say, I need more details before I can tell you how much money I need. They're trying to eliminate you on the basis that you might ask for more money. If you ask for too much money, they will eliminate you. So what you try and do is you try and not give a number, okay? This is the first thing you can do. If they are satisfied with that, that's fine, you move on. If they're not satisfied and they press you further, you can say, can I ask what the approved salary range is for this position? Okay, so they're saying, give us a number, and you're saying, okay, well, what's the range? You turn it back at them. And then if they tell you the range, you say, well, that's fine. Okay, so they can't eliminate you because you asked for too much money. But let's say that this answer is still not good enough. They say, well, we're not going to tell you the range, but we need to know how much money you need. Well, the third and final phase of this is to say, is you give them a wide salary range. Okay, for example, 40,000 to 80,000, something very low to something very high. Okay, and that way they can't eliminate you because you asked for too much money, but it also leaves you open later to ask for more money because you never committed to a small amount of money. So that's a great way to answer this question. It allows you to pass and move on. Okay, number 4, what is your weakness? They're probably going to ask you this in some form or another. Basically, any question where you have to answer with something negative about yourself, okay? Now, the thing is, don't give a real weakness, because most recruiters actually will eliminate you if you give an actual flaw. They'll tend to view you as that thing that you said, okay? And this is a real problem. So a great answer to this question is to use this template, okay? You say, I do this thing that's good, but it can lead to this thing that's bad. But then I do this other thing that's good, and that fixes everything completely. Okay? Now, what this does is, first of all, it doesn't give them a direct weakness. It gives you two things. It gives them two things that you do that's good. And that's the whole point of a job interview, is to tell them the things you do that are awesome. Okay? And it's this good thing that can sometimes have a bad side effect. And that's perfectly reasonable. For example, I have very high standards. I do this good thing. But it can sometimes lead to other people being frustrated with me because they don't share those standards. But then I have some really great communication skills, and I employ them to smooth things over, and that solves the entire problem, and it's never a problem. Okay, so this is a great way to answer this question. Not only does it not reveal any real weaknesses or anything serious, but it also shows off two of your strengths. Okay, number 5, where do you see yourself in 5 years? This is a question where they're asking you about the future. Okay, they're trying to get you to make a prediction. Now, the answer to this question is always basically, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I see myself in this job. Okay, they're hiring you. They want to hire somebody for this job. Okay, but the problem is, different organizations have different expectations. Some organizations want people to be promoted by then, others don't. And you're not a mind reader, so you don't know who you're dealing with and what these people want exactly. So a great answer to this question is to say, I expect to be advancing based on my job performance and likely taking on some new responsibilities. Okay, that's pretty benign enough. If you have to say more, you could say, do you mind me asking where you see this organization going in the future? Because you're trying to strike up a two-way conversation with them, which is a good thing, and not have it be an interrogation. And if they're asking you about the future, this is a great opportunity for you to get them to talk about the future too. And that leads to good things. Okay, number 6, why did you leave your last job? This can be awkward depending on what your story is. Now, if you were laid off from your last job, it's perfectly okay to say so, okay? You could explain that your company was downsizing or that your term expired. That's perfectly fine. If you left your last job, once again, it's perfectly okay to say so. You could explain that you were ready to do more, okay? And that's why you left. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's a good thing, okay? However, if you were fired from your last job, this is where it can get a bit tricky, okay? Now, I just want you to know that a job interview is not a court of law, and it's not a deposition, okay? So they don't have the right to demand that you reveal this if you don't want to reveal it, okay? And if you were fired, my personal recommendation would be that you don't share this information. You don't want to lie about it, but you don't want to advance this information, okay? Instead, you might be able to mention the point of contention at your last job. You could say, well, I was hired for a specific role, but then they changed my role into something else, and I had no interest in doing that new role. Okay, so that can be a way out of this question. Okay, the point I also want to make here is that when you're answering this question, never badmouth a previous employer or a previous boss or a previous coworker or anything else or anyone else. Okay? The problem is that if they ask you about why you left and you launch into a tirade of how bad your last job is, that's a red flag. That will get you eliminated. So don't do that. Okay, number 7. Why do you want to leave your current job? Might sound like a similar question, but it's not the same. Okay? Once again, don't say anything negative about your current job. They're basically saying, if we were to hire you, why would you take this job instead of continuing with your current job? Okay. The best answer to this is to say, I'm ready to do more, and then explain. Okay. You don't even have to explain, but you could just leave it at this. But if you do explain, okay, give them elements similar to this job. So if you're ready to do more, explain what you would like to do more of, and have those things that you say be the things that this job involves. That way you come across as a really great fit, okay? And you don't say anything that eliminates you. Number 8, what do you know about our company? Pretty simple to answer, this one. Takes a bit of preparation. Scan the employer's website before the job interview, okay? This should only take about 5 minutes. You basically need to know their products, if they sell products, or their services, if they sell services, what industry they're in, who their competitors are. You don't have to memorize the names of your competitors, their competitors, but it would be really amazing if you knew the difference between this company and their competitors. What's this company doing that's different from its competitors? That gives you a lot of points if you can explain that to them. Okay, number 9, how do you handle stress? Now, the best answer to this is to say, I handle stress very well, and then stop talking. Let me explain. The more you talk about how you've been stressed in the past and how you've had to do all these kind of things to manage it, that paints you in a bad light, okay? They're going to paint you with this brush. They're going to think of you as someone who gets stressed easily and has problems with it, okay? So you want to basically not go into detail. So if you feel awkward just leaving it at this, you can maybe say, I've had to deal with stress on occasion, but it's never been a problem in the past. Okay, you could say something like that and leave it at that. Okay, don't keep running your mouth. Stop talking, let them move on. Okay, now there's one final point I'd like to make with this question. Okay, and that is that there's a difference between handling stress and avoiding stress. Okay, now if you were to answer and say, like, well, I deal with stress by working with other people, or I deal with stress by being very organized and planning ahead. The problem is that you're not describing how you handle stress, you're describing how you avoid stress, okay? You can't always avoid stress by being organized and working with other people. Things go wrong. Things happen that are unscheduled and were not foreseen. So stress is upon you, and they're asking you how you handle it. Okay, so it's a different question than saying, I'm just very organized and I make stress not happen. Okay, so that's one thing you got to keep in mind. Okay, number 10, tell me about a time. Now, there's about literally 1 million questions that could start with tell me about a time that they could ask you in a job interview. Tell me about a time you missed a deadline. Tell me about a time you had a conflict with your boss. Tell me about a time that you used creativity to solve a problem. Okay, these are all questions that start this way, and they all involve you telling a story from your past. How do we prepare and answer these questions? Well, before the interview, recall and memorize 10 work-related stories from your past. Okay, have these stories on the tip of your mind, and you've practiced telling them in a very compact way that doesn't take you 5 minutes. Okay? These stories should be about successes, failures, and conflict resolution. Okay? So find 10 stories that describe these things from your past. Then, whenever they ask you about specific stories, use one of the 10 stories you prepared and adapt it slightly if necessary. Okay, so you will never be stumped and never be searching for what to say when they ask you this question, because you've got 10 stories that are on the tip of your mind all ready to go, and they've been vetted and they've been rehearsed, and you know what you're doing. That's how you pass this question. It's called a behavioral-based question. Okay, finally, probably the last question they're going to ask you is, do you have any questions? Or do you have any questions for us? Here's 3 things you could say. What challenges do you see ahead for this role? What do you enjoy most about working for this company? Can you describe a typical day for someone in this role? Okay, so these would be great questions to ask. Now, at the very end of the job interview, after you're sort of, shaking hands and saying goodbyes, the last thing you want to ask them is you want to say, where do we go from here? Okay, so you know what the next step in this job interview process is. Are they going to call you? Are they going to email you? Are you going to hear from them, etc.? Okay, I'd like to make two essential points here that are extremely important for passing a job interview. Number one is to say, I really want this job. Not in a desperate way, in a genuine way. And that doesn't mean I want any job. It means I want this job. And then explain why your strengths are the requirements for this job. Okay? That way, not only do you come across as enthusiastic and you come across as a good fit, but you show a lot of qualities that they're looking for. The other point I want to make is don't show any frustration, disappointment, or boredom with anything in this process at any point. Okay, so no matter how they treat you, no matter how it goes, no matter what they say to you, or maybe a weird question they ask, or a weird reaction they have, no matter what, don't show any frustration, disappointment, or boredom. Because if you do, that's pretty much the kiss of death. Okay, now, finally, I want you to remember that a job interview is essentially a test of your soft skills. Okay? If there was a problem with your technical skills, they would have seen that on your resume and not asked you for an interview. That's usually how it goes. So what they're really wanting to see in a job interview is not your technical skills, it's your soft skills. Okay, that's the real purpose of doing this. Okay? The big question is, are you someone that they would want to work with? Okay, that's what they're asking themselves, and they're trying to determine by interviewing you. Okay, now how can you prove this? How can you convey that you're someone that they would want to work with? Well, have the right attitude. Be positive, be accommodating, don't get offended over every little thing, and give the impression that you're someone who's on their side. You're not someone that's just going to be out for themselves. You're someone that's got their back and would make a good employee. Okay? Make sure your communication skills are good. So not only you can express yourself well verbally, but make sure you understand protocol, okay? Like when to shake hands, when to say certain things, and also understanding non-visual cues. Okay, so body language and things like that. If you don't know the basics of body language, that's something I recommend you study up on. And make sure your presentation is done properly, like the way you dress, the way you look, the way you carry yourself, and the appropriateness of how you look and how you act and what you say. Don't be making off-color jokes or anything like that. That would be inappropriate. Okay, so by doing all these things, you can basically help them answer yes to this question. You're someone they would want to work with, and that's the big purpose of the job interview. That can trump technical skills a lot of times. Now, I want you to know that there's value in everybody, okay? Everybody has elements that are good, that are useful, and that are valuable, okay? We all have them in different combinations and different quantities, but they're all there. And for that reason, you're awesome. Everybody watching this is awesome. It sometimes takes us a while to connect with the right job, but there is a right job out there for every person.